The first time my aunt slid a stack of papers across my grandparents' dining table and said, "Susan, if you don't sign this, the family will never look at you the same," I honestly thought she was being dramatic. By the third meeting, when there were folding chairs lined up like a makeshift jury box, Bibles scattered across the table, and church elders sitting stiffly at the ends like moral referees, I understood something I'd never wanted to admit. In my family, love always came with conditions. My name is Susan Miller. I'm 34 years old. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. My apartment has peeling paint on the bathroom ceiling, a wobbly IKEA coffee table, and a cat who hates everyone but me. And just outside a tiny Missouri town called Maple Ridge, there is a sagging white farmhouse and 22 acres of land that legally belong to me. Not to my dad, not to my aunt, not to the clan. Me. My grandparents left it all to me in their will. My family decided that was a problem they were going to fix. They just didn't expect me to stop playing the role I'd been assigned my whole life. The quiet, helpful one who never says no. They definitely didn't expect a lawyer. If you drive about an hour south from Kansas City, the city glass and concrete slowly give way to fields, small towns, and beat-up gas stations with 3 pumps and a handwritten sign that says, "Restroom for customers only." Maple Ridge is one of those towns you only end up in if you're lost, born there, or visiting family. There's a Casey's, a diner called Betty's Place that does meatloaf on Tuesdays, a Dollar General, and a red brick Methodist church with a white steeple and a parking lot full of pickup trucks every Sunday. My grandparents, Frank and Margaret Miller, bought their land there in 1979. They weren't rich. Grandpa drove a delivery truck for a feed company. Grandma worked the register at the grocery store for decades. They saved, gardened, fixed things themselves, and argued about politics while drinking Folgers at the kitchen table. They raised 3 kids in that farmhouse. My dad, Tom, the oldest, a people pleaser whose superpower is pretending everything is fine, no matter what. My aunt, Caroline, the middle child, dramatic, loud, and absolutely certain. Her opinion is the final word on every subject. My uncle, Dennis, the youngest, charming in a greasy way. Always with some new business idea that would definitely work this time. I was the first grandchild. Some of my earliest memories are of that house, falling asleep on the scratchy plaid couch while the Royals game hummed on TV, running barefoot in the yard, toes sinking into clover and dandelions, standing on a step stool in the kitchen to help Grandma stir cake batter while she hummed old church hymns under her breath. As I got older, the visits changed. I went to college in Kansas City and then got a job as a marketing coordinator for a regional hardware chain. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to cover rent, student loans, and my coffee addiction. Meanwhile, my grandparents started to slow down. Grandpa's knees hurt. Grandma's blood pressure went up. Their world shrank to the house, the church, the doctor's office, and the grocery store. My aunts and uncles still lived closer to them than I did. Aunt Caroline and Uncle Dennis were both less than 20 minutes away. My dad was about 40 minutes out, but somehow, whenever there was an appointment to drive to, a leak to fix, or some new letter from the Social Security Administration they didn't understand, I was the one who got the call. "Susie," Grandma would say on the phone, using the nickname only she could get away with. "Your grandpa's gotten another letter from Medicare, and he swears they're trying to cheat him. Can you come look at it?" Or Grandpa would text me, slow, typo-filled texts he pecked out with one finger. "Can you come by? I need help, computer. Love. You." I'd grown a little inside, glance at my weekend plans, laundry, maybe brunch with a friend, a vague idea of rest, and then say yes. Most of the time, I drove down after work on Fridays, stayed the night in the little back bedroom, and drove home Saturday evening. I was the one who set up their online banking so they could pay bills without driving into town. I was the one who argued with the pharmacy tech when they tried to claim Grandma's prescription wasn't covered. I was the one who updated their Wi-Fi router when Grandpa accidentally reset it to factory settings and freaked out because the TV says error. I'm not saying my aunts and uncles never helped. They did, in their own limited way. A casserole dropped off here, a ride to church there. But the consistent, unglamorous grunt work of aging parents? That fell mostly to me. I told myself I didn't mind. They were my grandparents. They'd given me so much when I was little: time, love, a place to feel safe. This was payback. I didn't realize that somewhere in my extended family's unofficial ledger, all of that didn't count nearly as much as I thought, because it wasn't visible. It wasn't announced in church or posted on Facebook. It was just done. And then one February night, Grandpa had a heart attack in his recliner while watching a rerun of Jeopardy! The hospital called my phone. I got there before even my dad. I sat in the harsh fluorescent light of the ER, holding Grandma's trembling hand as the doctor explained they'd done everything they could. 8 months later, Grandma had a stroke in her sleep. Again, it was my number they dialed first. I went numb for weeks, getting through the funeral arrangements like a robot, organizing casseroles, picking photos for the slideshow, finding a black dress that still fit. It took a while before I remembered there was something that came after funerals: wills. I didn't think much about it. My grandparents weren't wealthy. Aside from the house and land, they had some savings, an old pickup truck, and not much else. So when we all gathered in a small conference room at a law office in a strip mall in South Kansas City, I expected the will reading to be a formality. Maybe some awkwardness over who got what knickknacks, but nothing major. The lawyer, a gray-haired man named Mr. Jameson, passed out photocopies of the will. We all sat around a fake wood table under buzzing fluorescent lights. A framed poster of a mountain with the word Perseverance in bold letters hung crookedly on the wall. Mr. Jameson read through the usual stuff. Small bank accounts divided between the 3 children. Personal belongings distributed broadly. A few small bequests to the church. Then he reached the part about the property. To our granddaughter, Susan Miller, he read, "We leave in full our property located at 315 County Road 8, Maple Ridge, Missouri, including the dwelling, all outbuildings, and associated land and mineral rights. We trust her to do with it as she sees fit." He kept reading, but the words blurred. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. They left the land to me. I glanced around the table. My dad's head was bowed, his face unreadable. My mom was chewing the inside of her cheek. My younger brother, James, looked surprised but not angry. Aunt Caroline's mouth had fallen open. She snapped it shut, lips thinning into a line. Uncle Dennis's eyebrows shot up. His eyes flicked from the papers to me, then to my dad. When it was over, Mr. Jameson asked if anyone had questions. Nobody said anything. We filed out of the room in stiff, hushed silence, clutching our copies of the will. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. "Congratulations, kiddo," James murmured awkwardly, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "Grandma always did say you were the responsible one." I managed a weak smile. My dad cleared his throat. "We'll talk later," he said, looking both proud and nervous. My mom gave me a quick hug and said, "This is a lot. Don't make any decisions too quickly, okay?" I nodded, feeling like I was underwater. Aunt Caroline and Uncle Dennis didn't say congratulations. They didn't hug me. Instead, Aunt Caroline waited until my parents had walked ahead, then stepped close, her perfume too strong, her nails digging lightly into my arm. "This isn't over," she said quietly. No one person holds the family's land. We'll figure out a way to fix this. She let go and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. It was the first warning shot. I just didn't recognize it as one yet. 3 weeks after the will reading, I was on my couch in Kansas City, wearing sweatpants and eating leftover Thai food while some forgettable crime show played on TV. My cat, Pumpkin, was curled up at my feet, snoring. My phone buzzed. New group text, Miller family, land matters. I opened it. Aunt Caroline had created the chat. The participants list included Aunt Caroline, Uncle Dennis, my parents, me, James, Cousin Lindsay, Cousin Mark, and inexplicably, 2 older relatives from Maple Ridge I barely knew, outside of funerals and holiday dinners, both in their 70s. The messages started coming fast. Caroline, we need to talk about the farm. Dennis, this isn't what Mom and Dad meant. Lindsay, sis, we love you, but that place belongs to the family as a whole. Mark, yeah, it's a heritage property, not a personal vacation spot. One of the older relatives chimed in. Aunt Ruth, technically my great-aunt. Our people always kept the land in the clan. No one person ever claimed it. Uncle Walt, the elders are concerned. This doesn't look right. Then Caroline again. We all decided it's best if the property is moved into a family structure, so it's protected. Susan, can you come out to Maple Ridge on Sunday? The elders would like to speak with you. My stomach twisted. The elders? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Sure. What time? Her reply came almost instantly. After church, noon. We'll have lunch and talk like a family. The phrase like a family felt less like comfort and more like a threat. On Sunday, I drove down. The farmhouse looked the same from the outside. White paint peeling a little more, the front steps sagging, the tire swing still hanging from the old oak, swaying gently in the breeze. But inside, it felt different. The air was heavier. The dining room table had been cleared of its usual clutter and replaced with neat stacks of paper, a couple of Bibles, and styrofoam cups of sweet tea, sweating onto napkins. Chairs lined both sides of the table and wrapped around the ends. It looked like a jury box. Aunt Caroline sat at the head, wearing a navy dress and a string of pearls. Uncle Dennis sat to her right, tapping his fingers on the table. My parents were halfway down on one side. On the other side, Aunt Ruth and Uncle Walt sat with grim expressions, their Bibles in front of them like props. Hi, Susan, my mom said softly. Hey, kiddo, my dad said, offering a tired smile. Sit down, Caroline said, her voice bright but her eyes sharp. We're just going to chat. I sat in the chair opposite her, feeling like I'd just been summoned to some kind of unofficial trial. Dennis pushed a stack of papers toward me. This is just some paperwork to fix this, he said. Nothing to worry about. The top page said quitclaim deed in bold letters. My name was typed neatly below. Susan Miller, grantor. Below that, the property address, and under grantee, Miller Family Heritage, LLC. I scanned the text, my heart starting to pound. This document transferred all my right, title, and interest in the property to this LLC. There was no mention of payment, no mention of me retaining any ownership, no mention of me having a say in decisions related to the land. The managing members listed on the LLC paperwork attached? Caroline and Dennis. I swallowed. What exactly is this? I asked, even though I already knew. It's how we keep the land in the family, Caroline said, her tone patient, like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. We created an LLC, so it's not just hanging out there in your name. That way we can make decisions as a group. It's for the good of the clan. It's about protection, Dennis added, Liability, taxes, all that. It's complicated. You don't want that headache, do you? My dad spoke up, sounding uneasy. They're just trying to help take the weight off your shoulders, honey. Property is a lot of responsibility. You work full-time. You live in the city. Susan, Aunt Ruth said, leaning forward, that land has been in our bloodline for generations. Never once did it belong to one person alone. Even when your great-grandfather died, the family knew it was for everyone. That's our way. Uncle Walt nodded. In our people, he said, you don't put yourself before the clan. Clan. The word stuck to my skin like oil. I looked back down at the deed. Nowhere did it say, for the clan. It said Miller Family Heritage, LLC, an entity controlled by two specific people, Caroline and Dennis. If I sign this, I said slowly, does that mean I'm no longer the owner? Caroline laughed lightly. Oh, sweetie, you're thinking about it wrong. Ownership is just a legal technicality. What matters is that we keep it as a family. Right now, on paper, it looks like you're hoarding it. That isn't the image we want in the church, in town, in the eyes of God. You'll still be part of decisions, Dennis said, waving his hand dismissively. We'll let you know what we're doing. You'll be in the loop. We'll let you know. Not you'll vote. Not you'll share. Not you'll be equal. I was already feeling cornered, but then came the next layer. You need to think about what people will say, Caroline said, voice dropping. If you don't sign, if you insist on keeping everything for yourself, people at church are going to talk. The elders are already asking questions. Folks in town are talking too. They think it's strange. They think it's ungrateful. Ungrateful to who? I asked. To your bloodline, she snapped. Then softer, we don't want this to divide the family, Susan. But if you go against the clan, we can't protect you from the consequences. What consequences? I asked, my voice small. Silence answered for a beat. Then Aunt Ruth said quietly, people remember, doors close, invitations stop. It gets very lonely when you're the one who turned your back on your people. I looked at my parents. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad looked like he was shrinking into his chair. I need time, I said finally. I don't understand this stuff. I want to read it over. Caroline sighed heavily, like I was being unreasonable. Fine, she said, but the probate hearing is next month. We need this sorted before then. The last thing we want is to look like a fractured family in front of a judge. That would be embarrassing. For all of us. Embarrassing. There it was. Not illegal. Not wrong. Embarrassing. I took the papers, slid them into my bag, and drove back to Kansas City in a fog. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone was buzzing with more messages from the group chat. We're trusting you to do the right thing. Don't let us down. Grandma and Grandpa wanted unity. Don't be the one to break the chain. I sat in my parked car, staring at my phone, my chest tight. Then, for the first time in a long time, a tiny rebellious thought surfaced. What if the right thing wasn't what they said it was? That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the quitclaim deed, my laptop, and a rapidly cooling mug of coffee. I typed quitclaim deed family pressure into Google. Then, can my family force me to sign over inheritance? Then, probate court Missouri heir rights. I fell down a rabbit hole of estate law articles, Reddit threads, blog posts by lawyers who sounded exhausted by how often they saw this exact situation. One sentence kept appearing. Do not sign anything without speaking to a lawyer. I looked back at the deed. It clearly stated that I was conveying all of my interest in the property to the LLC for $10 and other good and valuable consideration. $10. They weren't even pretending to pay fair value. I flipped to the LLC paperwork. Managing members: Caroline Miller and Dennis Miller. No mention of me. No default share of profits. No built-in requirement to consult me on any sale, lease, or loan. The more I read, the sicker I felt. I thought about calling my dad, but I knew what he'd say. He'd talk about keeping the peace, about not making waves, about how land isn't worth losing your family over. I thought about calling Aunt Caroline, but I knew what she'd say too. More guilt, more clan, more talk about what God wants. Instead, I opened a new tab and typed, Probate Attorney, Kansas City, free consultation. That's how I found Naomi. Her website was simple: white background, a photo of a woman in her 40s with dark hair pulled back, wearing a blazer and cowboy boots, standing with her arms crossed in front of a field. Underneath, it said, Naomi Brooks, attorney at law, estate planning, and probate, protecting your legacy and your sanity. I clicked. Her biography talked about growing up on a farm, watching relatives tear each other apart over land, and deciding to go to law school because of it. I stared at the contact form. In the reason for consultation box, I typed, my grandparents left me their land. My extended family is trying to pressure me into signing it over to them using guilt, religion, and threats. I don't know what my options are. I hit submit. She called the next morning. Her voice was steady and calm. Hi, Susan. This is Naomi. I saw your message. When can you come in? Her office was on the second floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind that smelled like coffee and dust and old copies of contracts. The waiting room had 2 gray chairs, a small table with outdated magazines, and a plant that might have been real or very good plastic. Naomi's office itself had a big window overlooking a busy street, shelves of legal books, a couple of framed certificates from the University of Missouri, and a photo of a little farmhouse on a wall. Come on in, she said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. Tell me what's going on. I sat in the chair opposite her desk and felt my throat tighten. I'd been holding everything in, dodging and deflecting, and trying not to cause drama for weeks. Suddenly, there was someone whose entire job was to listen to the drama and not blame me for it. So I told her. I told her about my grandparents, about the will, about the way everyone had looked at me in that conference room, about the group chat, the elders, the clan talk, the quitclaim deed, the notary plan they'd hinted at for the next meeting, the threats about being dead to the family. At one point, I realized my hands were shaking. Naomi listened without interrupting, jotting notes occasionally on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she held out her hand. Can I see the deed? She asked. I slid the packet across the desk. She scanned it quickly, flipping a few pages back and forth, then set it down and looked at me. Okay, she said. First things first, you were not crazy for feeling like this is wrong. It is wrong. My eyes stung. So, I shouldn't sign it? I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it. If you sign this, she said, tapping the deed, you are giving up your ownership of the property permanently. You will have no legal rights to it. None. If they decide to sell it, bulldoze the house, or take out a loan using it as collateral, they do not have to ask your permission. They do not have to pay you anything beyond whatever they feel like. Once you sign, you cannot undo it just because you regret it later. I let that sink in. Even if they pressured me? I asked. She shrugged slightly. Coercion is hard to prove after the fact, especially without documentation. That's why I'm glad you came now, before you signed. Has anyone put their threats or guilt trips in writing? Yes, I said. Texts, group chat messages, Facebook DMs. Good, she said. We're going to save those. She explained that the will was clear and valid. My grandparents had the right to leave their property to whoever they wanted. Unless someone could prove they were incompetent or manipulated when they wrote it, the court's job was to carry out their wishes, not override them based on family feelings. Your aunt and uncle are trying to do an end run around probate by getting you to sign it away voluntarily, Naomi said. They don't want to contest the will because they know they probably won't win. So instead, they're using social pressure and religious guilt. That's exactly what it feels like, I said. She leaned back in her chair. How close are we to the probate hearing? She asked. About 4 weeks, I said. Mr. Jameson said he'd be filing everything soon. Okay, she said. Here's what I recommend. 1, do not sign anything. 2, do not tell them you've hired me. 3, from this moment on, every time they call you about the land, you record the call. Missouri is a one-party consent state. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it. 4, save every message, every guilt trip, every "you'll be dead to us" text. And then? I asked. And then, she said, we go to probate. We present the will as written. If they show up with some story about wanting to keep it in the clan and hint that you agreed to something, we produce the evidence that they've been trying to bully you into giving up your inheritance. Judges do not like bullies. I sat there, stunned. All my life, I'd been taught that bringing outside help into family business was betrayal, that you handled things privately, quietly, no matter how unfair they were. Won't this make things worse? I asked. In terms of them being mad at you? She said. Probably. But ask yourself this, are you more afraid of making them mad, or of spending the rest of your life regretting that you signed away? The only thing your grandparents left you because you wanted to keep the peace. I imagined Aunt Caroline's face if she found out I'd hired a lawyer. Then I imagined myself at 50, looking at some new development on that land, condos or a solar farm or a giant warehouse, and knowing I'd given it up for free to people who didn't even see me as a full person. I thought about Grandma's hands, soft and warm, holding mine in the hospital. Grandpa's voice on the phone saying, "You're a good girl, Susan. You always show up." I straightened my shoulders. I don't want to sign, I said. I want to keep what they gave me. Naomi smiled, just a little. Good, she said. Then let's make sure you can. The next few weeks were an exhausting mix of performance and documentation. On the outside, nothing changed. I still answered Aunt Caroline's calls. I still replied to the group chat occasionally. I still drove down once more when they insisted on another talk. But on the inside, I had flipped a switch. Before every call, I opened the voice recording app on my phone and hit record. I saved every text, every Facebook message. I took screenshots and backed them up to a folder Naomi told me to create and share with her. I made my voice small and uncertain in conversations and asked questions Naomi had suggested. So, what happens if I don't sign? I just don't want to upset anyone. Caroline, thinking she was winning, said, "You will split this family in half. The elders won't speak to you. No one will invite you to anything. You'll be alone at Christmas. That's what happens if you don't sign." I saved that recording. Dennis bragged on one call, "Once we get it into the LLC, we can finally talk to those developers who've been sniffing around. We can sell off the back 10 acres, pay off some debts, maybe even buy a place in Florida. Your grandparents never wanted it just sitting there." He said that while also claiming they only wanted to protect the land. I saved that too. There were messages like, "If you loved your grandparents, you do this." People in church are already whispering, "God doesn't bless selfishness. Don't embarrass us in front of the judge." Sometimes after hanging up, I'd sit on my couch and sob, feeling like the worst person alive. The conditioning ran deep. Good daughters keep the peace. Good granddaughters don't drag their relatives into court. Good Christian girls don't hire lawyers against family. Then I'd take a deep breath, open my laptop, and upload another recording to the folder. Naomi called once a week to check in. "You're doing great," she'd say. "I know it feels awful, but what you're doing right now is building a wall between their manipulation and your future regret." The night before the probate hearing, my phone buzzed again. "Caroline, you can still fix this. If you stand up tomorrow and tell the judge you're giving the land to the family, we can move on. If you don't, this will never be the same." I typed, my fingers shaking. "I understand." Then I turned my phone off and went to bed. I slept badly, dreams full of judges with my grandmother's face, of my aunts and uncles chanting selfish as I walked down a long hallway. In the morning, I put on the nicest clothes I owned, a navy sheath dress, a black blazer, low heels. I pulled my hair back into a neat ponytail and put on just enough makeup to look like I was okay. I wasn't okay, but I was determined. The probate courtroom was smaller than I expected. It had beige walls, rows of wooden benches, a raised platform for the judge, and a clerk typing steadily behind a computer. There were no chandeliers, no grand speeches, just a stack of files and a docket of families trying to untangle what the dead had left behind. My family filled one whole bench on the right side of the room. I could feel their eyes on me as I walked in with Naomi. Caroline's expression went from smug to shocked to furious in a second when she saw the woman in the blazer at my side. Naomi leaned over and whispered, "Breathe, shoulders back. You belong here as much as they do." The judge, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense haircut, called our case. In the matter of the estate of Frank and Margaret Miller. Mr. Jameson, the original estate lawyer, stood and introduced himself. Naomi did the same. Then a third man stood up on the other side of the courtroom, next to my family's bench. "Your Honor, Mark Stevens for interested parties Caroline Miller and Dennis Miller, and on behalf of Miller Family Heritage, LLC." They'd hired their own lawyer. This was war. The judge flipped through the file. "We're here on a petition to admit the decedent's will to probate and to determine rightful ownership of the property at issue," she said. "I've read the filings. Counsel, anything you want to add before we proceed?" Mr. Jameson summarized the will. Small assets divided as written, and the Maple Ridge property left entirely to me. Then Mr. Stevens stood. "Your Honor," he said, "while we do not contest the validity of the will itself, my clients believe the decedent's true intent has been misunderstood. The property has functioned as a family homestead, a clan center, for decades. Numerous relatives contributed to its upkeep. My clients believe that Mr. and Mrs. Miller intended for it to remain under collective family control, and we have created a family entity to reflect that." He held up a sheet of paper. "This is a quitclaim deed that would transfer the property into an LLC, preserving it for the family." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Has the heir, Ms. Miller, signed this deed?" she asked. "Not yet, Your Honor," he said smoothly. "We were hopeful that, with some guidance from the court, she would see the wisdom of doing so." Naomi stood. "My client does not wish to sign any such deed," she said. "She wishes to accept the bequest as written." The judge turned to me. "Ms. Miller," she said, "do you understand that under this will, the property passes to you outright, and that you are under no legal obligation to sign any additional paperwork transferring it to anyone else?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I understand, and I want to keep it the way my grandparents left it." I could feel Caroline's stare burning into the side of my head. The judge nodded. "Very well," she said. Then what, precisely, is the legal basis for the interested party's request, Mr. Stevens? I'm not hearing an allegation of fraud or lack of capacity. He shifted just a bit. Well, Your Honor, there is the matter of fairness, he said. The decedents spoke often about wanting to keep the land in the family. Many relatives assumed they'd share in it. We're simply asking the court to acknowledge that broader intent. Do you have any written evidence of a contrary intent? The judge asked. Any codicils, letters, emails, recorded statements? He hesitated. Not in that form, Your Honor, but we do have affidavits from several family members about conversations in which the decedents expressed a wish for the land to be for the clan. Naomi stood again. Your Honor, she said, even if such vague statements were made, they cannot override the clear, unambiguous language of the will. And in determining whether any outside intent should be considered, the court should also be aware of the efforts that have been made to pressure my client into relinquishing her inheritance. She picked up a thick binder. With the court's permission, I'd like to submit Exhibits A through H, text messages, group chat logs, and transcriptions of phone calls in which Ms. Miller is threatened with social and religious ostracism if she does not sign a quitclaim deed, as well as discussions by the interested parties about using the property for their personal financial gain. The judge's eyebrows rose again. Bring them forward, she said. Naomi handed the binder to the clerk, who passed it up. The judge flipped through the pages, eyes scanning the highlighted sections. I watched her expression tighten. She read aloud from one page. If you don't sign, you'll be dead to this family and alone at Christmas. Another, the elders will shun you, and God won't bless your selfishness. Here's one. Once we get it in the LLC, we can finally sell off the back acres and pay off our debts. She looked up over the rims of her glasses at my family's bench. Counsel, these are your clients? She asked. Mr. Stevens cleared his throat. Your Honor, these are emotional conversations during a difficult time, he said. Family members grieving, saying things they don't mean. I don't think it's fair to characterize them as evidence of an attempt to coerce an heir into giving up a lawful bequest, the judge said sharply, because that's exactly what they look like. There was a beat of silence. Then she turned to me again. Ms. Miller, have you felt pressured by your relatives to sign this deed? She asked. Every instinct I had screamed at me to downplay it, to say, oh, it's fine. Families fight. I don't want to make a big deal. But I thought of Naomi's words, of my grandparents' hands, of all the drives down to Maple Ridge with a trunk full of groceries and my laptop for online banking. Yes, Your Honor, I said. They've told me if I don't sign, I'm selfish, that I'll be embarrassing the family in court, that I'll be cut off, that my grandparents would be disappointed in me. It's been nonstop. I swallowed. I love my grandparents. I still do. They left the land to me. I don't think I should have to give it up to prove I care about my family. The judge looked at me a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said. You did the right thing by consulting counsel. She turned back to the other side. Mr. Stevens, absent evidence that the decedents were incompetent, defrauded, or under undue influence themselves when they executed this will, I see no legal basis for this court to rewrite it in order to satisfy the disappointed expectations of other relatives. Vague memories of conversations about the clan are not enough to overcome a clear, written bequest. She tapped the binder. Furthermore, these messages demonstrate a sustained effort to pressure the heir into surrendering her inheritance through threats of social and religious punishment. That is precisely the kind of behavior that probate courts are meant to guard against, not reward. Mr. Stevens opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. The judge picked up her pen. "The will of Frank and Margaret Miller is admitted to probate as written," she said. "The property at 315 County Road 8 passes entirely to Susan Miller. Any transfer of that property in the future will be at her sole discretion. The court will not enforce or endorse any attempt to coerce such a transfer." Her gavel came down with a soft thud. "Next case," she said. Just like that, it was over. My knees felt weak with relief. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for a month. Naomi squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," she said quietly. "You held the line." As we stepped into the hallway, the thunderstorm hit. Not outside, inside. Caroline stormed out after us, heels clicking, face flushed. "How could you do this?" she hissed. "You humiliated this family. You made us look like monsters. You brought a lawyer against your own kin." "I told the truth," I said. My voice was calm. That surprised me more than her anger did. Dennis stepped closer, his jaw clenched. "You think that judge cares about our way of doing things?" he demanded. "You let some outsider tell you it's okay to spit on your heritage." I looked from one to the other, feeling something in me settle. "Grandma and Grandpa chose me," I said. "They put my name in writing. You chose to threaten me, guilt-trip me, and try to take it. That wasn't heritage. That was greed wrapped in Bible verses." Caroline's eyes filled with angry tears. "You are not welcome in my home," she said. "Don't come to Christmas. Don't come to Easter. Don't show your face in Maple Ridge and expect hospitality." "Okay," I said. She blinked, thrown off. "Okay," she repeated. "Okay," I said again. "If being part of this family means signing away what they gave me and pretending none of this happened, then no. I'm not interested in that kind of family." My dad hovered nearby, torn. "Honey, maybe we can talk about this later," he said weakly. "No," I said, turning to him. "I'm done talking about it. We settled it where it needed to be settled." Naomi touched my arm. "We should go," she murmured. We walked out of the courthouse into an overcast afternoon. The air smelled like rain and asphalt. I felt strangely light, not happy, not yet, but free in a way I hadn't expected. The fallout was swift. I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving that year. No text, no email, no, "Are you coming?" from Caroline or Dennis. My parents went, though. My dad called the day before, his voice apologetic. "We're going just so they don't say we're choosing sides," he said. "It doesn't mean we agree with them." "It's okay," I said, even though it wasn't. On Thanksgiving Day, I made myself a small dinner in my apartment, a turkey breast from the grocery store, instant mashed potatoes, canned green beans. I poured myself a glass of cheap red wine and watched a parade on TV. Pumpkin sat on the back of the couch, tail flicking, watching me. When my phone stayed silent, I cried for a while. Not because I regretted anything I'd done in court. I didn't. But grief doesn't just attach to people who die. It attaches to the version of family you thought you had. Eventually, I wiped my face, turned off my phone, and opened my laptop. I made a new document and titled it, "Plan for the Farm." It felt right to call it that. The farm. My farm. I made a list, fix the roof, get the wiring inspected, deal with the mold in the bathroom, talk to Naomi about property taxes and maybe an LLC in my own name for liability, decide, keep as personal retreat, rent it out, combination. Over the next months, that list turned into real actions. I found a contractor willing to drive out to Maple Ridge. The roof got patched, the worst of the wiring got replaced. I tore up the carpet in the front room by myself one Saturday and discovered old hardwood floors underneath, scuffed but beautiful. On another trip, while cleaning out a bedroom closet, I found a metal box buried under some quilts. Inside were photos, dozens of them, black and white pictures of the farm when it was new. Grandpa standing proudly by a truck with Miller Feed Delivery painted on the door. Grandma in flared jeans leaning against the porch railing, laughing. There were letters too, old birthday cards, a few notes in Grandma's looping handwriting, written on torn notebook paper. One was addressed to me. Not formally, just my name at the top, Susan. I sat on the floor and read it. Susan, if you're reading this, it probably means your grandpa and I have gone home to the Lord, and you're cleaning up our mess. We left you this place because you always showed up. That's really all there is to it. You drove us to the doctor when no one else could be bothered. You fixed the internet so your grandpa could watch his silly videos. You brought groceries and never made us feel like a burden. You love this land with us, not from a distance, with your feet in the mud and your hands on the steering wheel. We did not leave it to the family, because that would mean leaving it to people who only remembered this place existed when there was something to fight over. We don't owe them that. Neither do you. You owe nobody your inheritance. You owe nobody your peace. If they give you trouble, remember this. Loyalty is not one-sided. If they only call it family when you're giving things up, it isn't family. It's a habit. Do what is right for you. We trust you. Love you more than biscuits. Grandma, I cried so hard my chest hurt. Then I made a copy of that letter, scanned it, and put the original in a plastic sleeve to keep it safe. Whatever doubts I'd had about whether I'd betrayed my grandparents melted away. They'd known exactly what kind of storm this would create. They'd chosen me anyway. Over the following year, I split my weekends between my life in the city and the slow, stubborn project of bringing the farmhouse back to life. I painted the walls. I scrubbed cabinets. I hauled out broken furniture, sorted through decades of stuff, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. I set up a small desk by the window in the back room and started working from there on Fridays when my boss okayed it. There's something about answering marketing emails while watching the wind move through the trees that makes corporate nonsense a little easier to tolerate. Eventually, I listed the farmhouse on Airbnb as a simple country retreat. Nothing fancy. Just a clean, comfortable place for people to get away from the city, with a porch swing and a big sky full of stars at night. The first booking felt like a tiny miracle. Slowly, the income covered the property taxes, the utilities, and then some. The money that would have gone straight into Caroline and Dennis's pockets if I'd signed that deed. It went into a separate account labeled Farm Fund instead. Roof repairs, fence upgrades, a new water heater, a savings cushion for when something big inevitably broke. People in town noticed, of course. Some were cold. A few lifelong church ladies gave me cool nods instead of warm hugs when they saw me at the grocery store. I heard through my parents that there were still whispers about how I dragged my family into court. But there were other reactions, too. One day at Betty's place, as I sat alone eating meatloaf and mashed potatoes, an older woman I knew vaguely as Mrs. Harper slid into the booth across from me without asking. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and said, "Your grandma told me once she was leaving you this place because you actually came when she called." I blinked, surprised. She said that others had their own lives. Mrs. Harper continued. But you were the one who showed up when the doctor's office called about test results. You were the one who reset the Wi-Fi every time it died. She wasn't confused when she wrote that will. You hear me? Tears pricked my eyes. I hear you, I said. She nodded. Then stop letting people who weren't there tell you what she meant. News about the Airbnb filtered around too. Some relatives used it as fresh ammunition. Look at her, making money off the farm like a hotel, Caroline reportedly said. Others booked weekends. One of my cousins, Mark, came with his wife and kids. He messaged me privately afterward. "Hey, I know things are weird with Mom and Uncle D, but the place looks great. The kids loved it. Grandma would have been proud." That message meant more to me than he probably realized. Not long after, my dad started coming out on weekdays sometimes, just to sit on the porch with me. He'd bring a bag of fast food burgers and a 6-pack of soda. One evening, as the sky turned orange and pink, he cleared his throat. "I should have stood up for you more," he said. I looked at him, surprised. "In court, you mean?" I asked. "In general," he said. "Your aunt's got a way of steamrolling people. I let it happen too many times. I didn't want to be in the middle, so I pretended I wasn't. Even when you were the one getting squeezed." I didn't say anything at first. Pumpkin, who had decided the farm was an acceptable second home, wandered between our ankles. "I thought keeping the peace was the most important thing," he said. "But what you did, going to a lawyer, standing up there and saying no, that was brave. I know it cost you." I felt my throat tighten. "It did," I said, "but signing would have cost more." He nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you, Susan," he said. I don't know if I ever said that out loud. I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said. "That helps." Holidays are still strange. There are 2 Christmases now, the one my parents go to with Caroline and Dennis, and the one I make for myself. Last year, instead of sitting alone in my apartment, I hosted a holiday misfits weekend at the farmhouse. A couple of friends came, people whose own families were complicated. We cooked too much food, watched cheesy movies, and took turns sharing stories about boundaries we were learning to set. At one point, my friend Jasmine raised her glass and said, "Here's to inherited land and inherited trauma, and to learning which one to keep." We all laughed, but there was a lump in my throat as I clinked my glass against hers. I stood at the kitchen window that night and looked out at the dark fields. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The house creaked and settled around us, old and stubborn and still standing. I thought of the girl who sat at that same table months earlier, surrounded by relatives telling her she'd be dead to them if she didn't sign a piece of paper. I thought of the woman who had walked into a courtroom instead and said, "No, this is mine." Here's what I know now. Family is not a magic word that makes everything done in its name holy. Tradition is not a shield to hide greed behind. Honor that only goes one way is not honor. It's control dressed up in nice clothes. You are allowed to keep what was freely, intentionally given to you. You are allowed to say no, even if everyone in the room shares your last name. You are allowed to choose a lawyer over loyalty to a system that only works when you disappear. My grandparents left me land. But more than that, they left me a chance to break a cycle where love always meant give more, be less, don't complain. I took it. If you've ever been in a room full of people telling you to sign something for the sake of the family, I hope you hear my story and know this. You're not selfish for asking questions. You're not disloyal for talking to a lawyer. You're not evil for refusing to sacrifice yourself on the altar of clan expectations. Sometimes the bravest, most loyal thing you can do, for the people who loved you, for the younger version of you who didn't know better, for the future you who deserves peace, is to keep the pen in your own hand, look up, and say, "No, not this time."